Pope Francis has once again made headlines, but this time his actions have left the world in absolute shock. Known for his humility and groundbreaking decisions, the Pope has always surprised believers and skeptics alike. But what did he do this time that has people talking across the globe? Stick around, because this might just be the most surprising move of his papacy yet. Pope Francis's announcement sent shockwaves through the Catholic community and beyond, with many caught off guard by the sheer gravity of his decision. It all began during a carefully planned address that had been kept under wraps until the very last moment. Vatican insiders reported an unusual sense of anticipation leading up to the event, with whispers that something unprecedented was about to unfold. The announcement took place within the Vatican's Paul VI Audience Hall, where Pope Francis often delivers his public addresses. Cardinals, bishops, and international reporters gathered, unsure of what to expect. As the Pope approached the podium, the room fell into complete silence, with an air of solemnity that made everyone sense something big was about to happen. His calm but firm demeanor, coupled with the weight of his words, made what followed even more striking. The Pope began by offering reflections on the current state of the Catholic Church and its role in the modern world. He spoke about the need for change, adaptation, and openness, echoing sentiments he has expressed in the past, but with an urgency that was unmistakable. Then, in a moment that left jaws dropping, Pope Francis unveiled his decision. Some gasped audibly, others leaned forward in disbelief. It wasn't just what he said, it was the implications of it that reverberated throughout the hall. The Pope's words carried a tone of finality, signaling that this was not merely a suggestion or opinion, but a definitive move. The Vatican press corps scrambled to understand and report on what had just occurred, their headlines practically writing themselves. This wasn't a minor administrative adjustment or symbolic gesture. This was history in the making. The weight of the announcement rippled through the religious and secular worlds alike, with media outlets across the globe quick to break the news. Catholics sat in their living rooms, glued to their televisions, trying to comprehend how this decision would impact their faith and the Church's future. News broadcasts flashed images of Pope Francis, looking serene yet resolute, alongside commentators debating the magnitude of his statement. Social media erupted within minutes. Faithful believers and skeptics alike flooded platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram with their reactions, some supportive, others stunned into silence, and still others fiercely critical. Memes, hashtags, and video clips spread like wildfire, with countless people weighing in on the Pope's actions. For many, it felt like a pivotal moment in their faith journey, a clear sign that the Church was at a crossroads. To understand why this moment was so earth-shattering, it's essential to reflect on the traditions and expectations that had long defined the papacy. Pope Francis, since his election in 2013, has built a reputation as a reformist pope who isn't afraid to challenge norms or speak uncomfortable truths. However, even his most vocal supporters did not see this coming. The papacy has historically been a beacon of continuity, where decisions are rarely abrupt or radical, but this move broke all the expectations of tradition. It raised countless questions. What would this mean for the Church moving forward? How would Catholics across the globe react? And what inspired Pope Francis to take such a decisive stance? Pope Francis has never been a stranger to bold actions, but this decision pushed the boundaries further than ever before. To truly grasp why this announcement was so shocking, we must consider the weight of tradition and how deeply rooted certain practices are within the Catholic Church. For centuries, the Church has stood as a bastion of stability, with its rituals, doctrines, and papal leadership representing continuity and unshakable resolve. Each pope inherits a mantle not just of religious authority, but of centuries of historical precedent. Many of these traditions date back to the very foundations of the Church, carrying an almost sacred, untouchable status among the faithful. Even minor deviations from these practices can cause waves within the Church, let alone decisions as significant as this one. Yet Pope Francis's leadership has consistently been defined by his willingness to step outside the boundaries of expectation. From the moment he chose to live in a modest Vatican guesthouse instead of the lavish apostolic palace, it was clear he intended to lead differently. He has been outspoken on issues such as poverty, climate change, and migration, prioritizing a message of compassion and inclusivity. Still, none of those actions prepared people for what came next. The tension between tradition and progress is not new within the Catholic Church. Historically, attempts to push for reform have often been met with resistance, with change happening slowly over decades or even centuries. Pope Francis's decision broke this mold entirely, signaling a departure from the cautious incrementalism that has characterized the Vatican's approach for generations. In doing so, he placed himself firmly at the center of a debate that has divided Catholics for years. Should the Church preserve its age-old traditions at all costs, or should it adapt to a rapidly changing world? For many Catholics, the shock of this announcement stemmed from the deep reverence they hold for tradition. The Church's rituals, teachings, and hierarchical structure have remained remarkably consistent over the centuries, providing a sense of stability and continuity in an ever-changing world. To challenge or alter any of these long-standing norms is, for some, akin to shaking the very foundations of their faith. Critics argue that breaking from tradition risks alienating the Church's most devoted followers and undermining its identity as a timeless institution. On the other hand, supporters of Pope Francis view his decision as a necessary step toward ensuring the Church's relevance in the modern era. They argue that clinging too tightly to tradition can make the Church seem out of touch with the realities of contemporary life, particularly among younger generations. For them, the Pope's actions are a bold but necessary attempt to bring the Church into the 21st century, ensuring that its message of faith and compassion can continue to resonate with people across the globe. In this context, Pope Francis's announcement becomes even more significant. By stepping outside the bounds of tradition, he has sparked a conversation that extends far beyond the walls of the Vatican. The reactions to his decision, whether supportive or critical, highlight the deep divisions that exist within the Church and the broader Christian community. While some see his actions as a betrayal of sacred traditions, others view them as a courageous effort to align the Church teachings with the challenges of modern life. At the heart of this debate lies a fundamental question: what does it mean to be a church in today's world? For Pope Francis, the answer appears to lie in a willingness to embrace change, even when it is uncomfortable or controversial. By doing so, he has once again demonstrated his commitment to leading with conviction, even in the face of uncertainty. For Catholics around the world, the shock of this moment will not soon be forgotten, as they grapple with the implications of Pope Francis's historic decision. The global reaction to Pope Francis's shocking decision was immediate, intense, and multifaceted. Within moments of his announcement, the news spread across the world like wildfire, igniting a torrent of responses from Catholics, non-Catholics, religious leaders, politicians, and everyday individuals. From the bustling streets of Rome to remote villages in South America, from grand cathedrals to small chapels, the world began to grapple with the weight and meaning of what had just occurred. In the Vatican, where reporters and religious leaders had gathered for the announcement, the reaction was a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. Some in attendance could be seen exchanging puzzled glances, their expressions a mix of confusion, excitement, and concern. Reporters, stunned by the gravity of the Pope's words, scrambled to relay the news to their audiences. Cameras flashed and microphones clicked on as journalists tried to interpret the significance of the Pope's decision. Vatican spokespeople were bombarded with questions, many of which they were unprepared to answer. This was not a typical announcement that followed months of public speculation or careful Vatican messaging. Instead, it felt seismic, as though the very fabric of the Catholic Church was being tested in real time. As the news spread, major media outlets interrupted their regular broadcast to cover the story. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and other networks ran breaking news banners, replaying footage of Pope Francis's solemn address. Analysts and religious commentators were brought onto panels to dissect the announcement, offering their interpretations of what it meant for the Church, its followers, and the broader world. Some commentators praised Pope Francis for his courage and foresight, while others expressed deep reservations, calling the move risky and potentially divisive. The headlines varied dramatically, reflecting the polarized nature of the reaction. Some read, "Pope Francis brings bold change to the Catholic Church," while others declared Pope Francis sparks controversy with unprecedented move. The Catholic faithful around the world responded with a wide range of emotions. For some, the Pope's decision was a moment of profound inspiration and hope. Many saw it as a sign that the Church was finally willing to address long-standing challenges adapt to modern realities, and listen to the concerns of its members. Social media lit up with messages of support, with hashtags celebrating Pope Francis as a leader of courage and vision. Devout Catholics shared images of the Pope alongside prayers and messages of gratitude, believing that his decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in the Church's history. Some praised his willingness to lead with compassion, empathy, and an eye toward the future. However, not everyone welcomed the news with open arms. For many traditional Catholics, Pope Francis's decision came as a shock that bordered on betrayal. To them, the Pope's actions represented a departure from sacred traditions that had been upheld for centuries. Some questioned whether the Pope had overstepped his authority, while others expressed fears that this move could fracture the unity of the Church. Social media became a battleground for competing perspectives, with passionate debates erupting between supporters and critics of the Pope's actions. Online forums, comment sections, and Facebook groups were flooded with emotional posts, some expressing anger, others voicing confusion, and still others calling for patience and understanding. The reactions were not limited to ordinary believers. Prominent Catholic leaders, including bishops, cardinals, and theologians, quickly weighed in on the controversy. Some bishops applauded the Pope's decision, hailing it as a necessary and overdue step toward reform. These leaders emphasized the importance of adapting to the needs of a rapidly changing world, arguing that the Church must be willing to evolve in order to remain relevant and effective. They encouraged their congregations to remain open-minded and to trust in the Pope's leadership, reminding them that the Church has faced similar challenges throughout its long history. On the other hand, more conservative factions within the Church were deeply troubled by the announcement. Some cardinals issued carefully worded statements expressing concern about the implications of the Pope's decision. A few outspoken critics did not hesitate to condemn the move outright, warning that it could lead to division, confusion, and even schism within the Church. Traditionalist groups called on Catholics to stand firm in their faith and resist what they viewed as a dangerous deviation from the Church's core teachings. In certain conservative circles, the Pope's decision was seen as a challenge to the very identity of the Catholic Church, which they believe is rooted in unchanging doctrine and centuries-old tradition. The ripple effect of the Pope's announcement was not confined to the Catholic Church. Leaders of other Christian denominations, as well as representatives of other major religions, also weighed in on the matter. Some expressed admiration for Pope Francis's bold leadership and willingness to confront difficult issues head-on. Others were more cautious, voicing concerns about the broader implications of his decision. Protestant, Orthodox, and evangelical leaders offered differing perspectives, with some applauding the Pope's courage, while others questioned the wisdom of such a move. Political leaders and public figures around the world also responded to the news, underscoring the global significance of the Pope's decision. In predominantly Catholic countries like Italy, Brazil, and the Philippines, the announcement sparked widespread discussion and debate. Politicians issued statements acknowledging the importance of the moment, with some expressing support for the Pope's vision and others urging caution. Even in secular societies, the news generated intense interest as commentators explored how the Pope's decision might influence cultural and political conversations on topics such as tradition, reform, and institutional change. Meanwhile, the reactions from everyday people were as diverse as the Church itself. In Catholic churches and parishes across the world, priests and congregants gathered to process the news together. Some prayed for guidance and understanding, while others engaged in spirited debates about the future of the Church. Conversations took place in homes, coffee shops, workplaces, and classrooms as people grappled with the implications of the Pope's announcement. For many, the decision prompted a moment of reflection on their own faith, beliefs, and relationship with the Church. In the days that followed, the Vatican faced mounting pressure to provide clarity and reassurance. Faithful Catholics around the world looked to Church leaders for guidance, hoping to better understand the reasoning behind the Pope's decision and what it would mean for them moving forward. Vatican spokespeople held press briefings and interviews to address the flood of questions pouring in from journalists and believers alike. At the same time, the Catholic Church found itself under a global spotlight, with millions watching closely to see how it would navigate this unprecedented moment in its history. What became clear in the wake of the announcement was that Pope Francis's decision had struck a nerve. Whether viewed as a bold act of leadership or a dangerous break from tradition, it sparked a conversation that transcended national borders, cultural divides, and religious affiliations. For better or worse, the world was paying attention, and the Catholic Church was once again at the center of a global debate about faith, tradition, and the need for change. Pope Francis's shocking announcement left the world reeling, but as the dust began to settle, questions arose about the intentions behind such a bold and unprecedented move. What motivated the Pope to take this step? Was it a carefully calculated decision to address mounting challenges within the Catholic Church, or was it the culmination of years of reflection on his part? To understand the Pope's motivations, one must look at his long-standing vision for the Church and the principles that have guided his papacy since the very beginning. Pope Francis has always been a reformer at heart. From the moment of his election in 2013, he distinguished himself as a different kind of pope, one who sought to bring the Catholic Church closer to the people, emphasizing humility, compassion, and service over rigid adherence to pomp and tradition. He famously broke norms when he declined to live in the luxurious apostolic palace, instead choosing a modest guest house within the Vatican. This small but symbolic gesture sent a clear message. Pope Francis intended to embody the humility and simplicity that Jesus Christ himself preached. Over the years, Pope Francis has repeatedly spoken about the need for the Church to adapt to the realities of the modern world. He has urged church leaders to focus less on dogma and more on pastoral care, emphasizing the importance of mercy, inclusivity, and understanding. He has criticized what he calls a self-referential church that focuses inwardly, insisting instead that the Church must look outward and engage with the struggles and hopes of the people it serves. His papacy has been marked by a consistent push for reform, whether addressing climate change in his encyclical Laudato Si, advocating for the poor and marginalized, or calling for greater dialogue with other faiths. Each of these initiatives reflected his broader vision, a church that is alive, compassionate, and relevant in a rapidly changing world. But Pope Francis's latest decision, the one that shocked the world, appears to go far beyond his earlier reforms. It signals not just an adjustment but a profound shift in the Church's approach. It is clear that the Pope's intentions are not superficial. This was not a decision made lightly or without deep reflection. Vatican insiders suggest that this move had been in the works for months, if not years. Behind closed doors, the Pope had reportedly been consulting with trusted advisors, theologians and bishops, weighing the potential risks and rewards of his decision. The Pope is known for his contemplative nature and for taking the time to pray over major decisions. For him to act with such finality indicates that he firmly believes this move is necessary for the future of the Catholic Church. One of the primary intentions behind the Pope's decision seems to be his desire to address some of the most pressing challenges facing the Church today. The Catholic Church, while still a global institution with over 1 billion followers, faces an increasingly complex and fragmented world. In many parts of the globe, particularly in Europe and North America, church attendance has declined, and younger generations are drifting away from organized religion. For decades, church leaders have struggled to understand why so many people feel alienated or disillusioned. Pope Francis has repeatedly acknowledged these realities, calling for the Church to ask itself difficult questions. How can it better serve the needs of the faithful? How can it reach those who feel forgotten or excluded? By taking such a bold step, Pope Francis appears to be addressing these questions head-on. His decision can be seen as an attempt to bridge the gap between the Church and the modern world, a signal that the Church is willing to evolve and engage with contemporary challenges. He likely hopes that this move will renew trust, spark meaningful dialogue, and inspire a sense of hope among those who have grown weary of institutional rigidity. The Pope's intentions may also include a desire to create a more inclusive church, one that welcomes people of all backgrounds and walks of life. He has often spoken of the need for the Church to be a field hospital, tending to the wounds of humanity rather than turning people away. In his view, a church that closes itself off from the world cannot fulfill its mission of spreading the gospel. Another factor that may have motivated Pope Francis is his deep concern for unity within the Church. While his decision is controversial, the Pope may see it as a way to confront long-standing divisions and spark conversations that have been avoided for far too long. The Catholic Church is a global institution spanning diverse cultures, languages, and perspectives. Within the Church, there have always been differing opinions on issues of doctrine, tradition, and reform. Pope Francis has made it clear that he believes unity does not mean uniformity, that the Church can and must find ways to accommodate diverse viewpoints while staying true to its core teachings. His actions could be seen as an effort to move the Church forward, encouraging open dialogue and a willingness to embrace the tensions that come with change. At the same time, Pope Francis's decision reflects his unwavering commitment to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Throughout his papacy, the Pope has emphasized that the Church must always return to the example of Christ himself, who preached love, mercy, and justice. In his speeches and writings, Pope Francis often reminds Catholics that Jesus reached out to those on the margins of society, the poor, the sick, the outcasts, and called for a radical transformation of hearts and minds. By taking this bold step, the Pope may be signaling his belief that the Church must embody that same spirit of courage and compassion, even when it means challenging long-held traditions. It is also worth noting that Pope Francis has often shown a willingness to confront criticism and opposition. He has never shied away from controversy, choosing instead to lead with conviction and faith in his vision. His decision, while divisive, demonstrates his belief that true leadership requires taking risks for the greater good. For Pope Francis, the Church's mission is far more important than his own popularity or legacy. He understands that change is often painful and unsettling, but he appears willing to endure criticism if it means setting the Church on a path that he believes is aligned with its true purpose. Ultimately, Pope Francis's intentions are rooted in a desire to ensure that the Catholic Church remains a beacon of hope, love, and truth in a complex and divided world. His decision may be controversial, but it reflects his deep belief that the Church must not retreat into irrelevance or isolation. Instead, it must face the challenges of the modern age with courage, humility, and a willingness to grow. Whether his decision will succeed in achieving his goals remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Pope Francis has once again demonstrated his unwavering commitment to a vision of the Church as a living, dynamic force for good in the world. For those trying to understand his motivations, it helps to look at Pope Francis's long record of leadership and the principles that have guided him. He is not a pope who acts impulsively or without purpose. Every step he takes is part of a larger effort to bring the Church closer to its mission and to the people it serves. By taking this bold step, Pope Francis is calling Catholics and the world to reflect on what it truly means to live out the teachings of Jesus in the 21st century. His intentions are clear: to challenge, inspire, and renew the Church, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable that process may be. The aftermath of Pope Francis's decision sent shockwaves not only through the Catholic Church, but across the global religious and political landscape. As people began to process the announcement, its implications, both immediate and far-reaching, became the subject of intense analysis and debate. The Vatican, for its part, found itself in the unenviable position of navigating the storm of reactions, managing tensions within the Church, and preparing for the inevitable ripple effects that would unfold in the coming weeks, months, and even years. Within the Catholic Church, one of the most immediate consequences was the widening gap between supporters and critics of Pope Francis's decision. While a significant portion of the Church's leadership, particularly those aligned with the Pope's vision, embraced his bold move as necessary and timely, other factions expressed deep discontent. Conservative bishops, cardinals, and theologians were among the first to voice their concerns, many issuing carefully worded statements that underscored their reservations while stopping short of outright condemnation. These leaders were quick to warn of the dangers of straying too far from tradition, arguing that the Pope's decision risked destabilizing the unity and identity of the Church. Behind closed doors, murmurs of discontent grew louder, with some even questioning whether Pope Francis's leadership was taking the Church in a direction from which it could not return. The divide within the Catholic Church became especially apparent during high-level meetings convened in the wake of the announcement. Vatican insiders reported tense discussions as Church leaders attempted to reconcile their differences and find common ground. For some bishops and cardinals, the challenge lay in balancing their loyalty to the Pope with their deeply held convictions about Church tradition. Others were more open to the idea of change, viewing the Pope's decision as a necessary step to address the challenges of the modern age. These discussions, though often contentious, revealed the complexity of the issues at hand. The Catholic Church is not monolithic, it spans continents, cultures, and centuries, and its leaders often hold vastly differing views on how best to serve the faithful. Pope Francis's decision brought these divisions to the surface, forcing the Church to confront its internal tensions in a way that it had not done in decades. For many ordinary Catholics, the aftermath of the announcement was a period of uncertainty, reflection, and deep soul-searching. In churches, parishes, and homes around the world, people gathered to discuss the Pope's decision and its implications for their faith. Some responded with excitement and hope, believing that the Pope's actions marked a new beginning for the Church, a chance to embrace change, renew its mission, and reach those who had felt alienated or forgotten. For these individuals, Pope Francis's decision was a sign that the Church was finally listening, adapting, and evolving in response to the realities of the modern world. It gave them hope that the Catholic Church could remain relevant and meaningful in their lives, even in an era marked by rapid social and cultural change. However, for others, the Pope's decision was a source of confusion, frustration, and even anger. Traditionalist Catholics, in particular, struggled to reconcile the Pope's actions with their understanding of the Church's teachings and traditions. For these individuals, the Catholic Church represents a sacred institution built on unchanging truths, and any deviation from those truths is seen as a betrayal. Some questioned whether they could continue to support a church that, in their view, was moving away from its foundational principles. Online forums, social media platforms, and local gatherings became spaces for these individuals to share their concerns, voice their doubts, and seek reassurance from their communities. For many, the period following the Pope's decision became a deeply personal journey, a time to reflect on their faith, their relationship with the Church, and their place within the broader Catholic community. The broader global response to the Pope's decision also revealed the far-reaching implications of his actions. Outside of the Catholic Church, religious leaders from other Christian denominations, as well as leaders of other major faiths, offered a wide range of perspectives. Some praised Pope Francis for his courage and leadership, viewing his decision as a bold and necessary move to address the challenges of modernity. Others were more critical, expressing concern about the potential consequences of such a radical shift. Evangelical and Orthodox Christian leaders, in particular, voiced apprehension about what they viewed as a departure from sacred traditions, warning that such actions could weaken the Church's authority and influence. Politicians, too, weighed in on the controversy, underscoring the global significance of the Pope's decision. In predominantly Catholic countries like Brazil, Mexico, and the Philippines, political leaders issued statements acknowledging the importance of the moment and calling for unity and calm among the faithful. Some leaders praised Pope Francis for his vision and willingness to confront difficult issues, while others urged caution, warning of the risks of division and unrest. Even in secular nations, where the Catholic Church wields less influence, the Pope's decision sparked widespread interest and debate, with commentators exploring its potential impact on cultural, social, and political dynamics. In the media, the aftermath of the announcement was characterized by intense scrutiny and analysis. Major news outlets dedicated hours of coverage to the unfolding story, bringing in religious experts, historians, and commentators to provide context and insight. Headlines reflected the polarized nature of the response, with some publications hailing the Pope as a visionary leader and others questioning the wisdom of his actions. Social media, meanwhile, became a platform for millions of people to share their reactions, with hashtags trending globally as people from all walks of life weighed in on the controversy. Memes, videos, and opinion pieces flooded the internet, reflecting the wide range of emotions sparked by the Pope's decision, everything from admiration and excitement to confusion and outrage. At the heart of the debate was a fundamental question: what does the future hold for the Catholic Church? For many, Pope Francis's decision was a turning point, one that could either strengthen the Church by making it more inclusive, compassionate, and relevant, or divide it by alienating those who cling to tradition. The Catholic Church has faced countless challenges throughout its history, from schisms and reform movements to cultural and political upheavals. Each of these moments tested the Church's resilience, forcing it to confront difficult questions about its identity, mission, and future. Pope Francis's decision was no different. It posed a challenge not only to church leaders but to Catholics around the world. How can the Church remain true to its core teachings while also adapting to a world that is constantly changing? In the weeks and months that followed, the Vatican worked tirelessly to address these questions and reassure the faithful. Pope Francis himself remained steadfast in his conviction, using his public addresses and writings to explain the reasoning behind his decision and to call for unity within the Church. He reminded Catholics that change, while often difficult, is sometimes necessary to fulfill the Church's mission of spreading the gospel and serving the people of God. He urged the faithful to trust in the Holy Spirit and to approach this moment with open hearts and minds. At the same time, the Vatican began to implement measures aimed at managing the fallout from the Pope's announcement. Special councils and committees were established to address the concerns of church leaders, theologians, and ordinary Catholics, with an emphasis on fostering dialogue and understanding. Vatican spokespeople worked to clarify the Pope's intentions, counter misinformation, and provide guidance to local dioceses and parishes around the world. These efforts were critical in maintaining stability and unity within the Church during a period of profound uncertainty and change. While the full impact of Pope Francis's decision remains to be seen, one thing is clear: his actions have sparked a global conversation about the role of the Catholic Church in the modern world. For better or worse, the Pope's bold move has forced Catholics and the world at large to grapple with questions of faith, tradition, and progress. It has reminded people that the Church, though ancient, is not immune to change. Whether this moment will be remembered as a turning point that revitalized the Church or as a source of division and strife will depend on how Catholics and church leaders respond in the years to come. Pope Francis's decision, however controversial, reflects his deep belief in the Church's mission and his willingness to take risks to ensure its future. In the end, the legacy of his actions will not be determined by the controversy they sparked, but by the impact they have on the Church and the billions of people it serves. For now, the world watches and waits as the Catholic Church navigates one of the most challenging and transformative moments in its history.